Hello, noble ones, and welcome to Metatron's Academy. Today we're checking out one of Polymathy's videos, and the title really drew me in because it's When Should You Learn Another Foreign Language? Now, both of us, we're good friends, by the way, but both of us speak multiple languages to various degrees. I'd be very interested to see if he gives a similar answer to what I would give when asked this question. So without further ado, we're not going to watch the entire video because it's over half an hour. We'll watch a little bit, see if we have similar ideas, and then of course I'll put the link in the description below. I'll put a link in the description for you to go check and finish the video. Let's go.
Hey, so when should you learn a second foreign language? So another foreign language. So I get this question a lot. If you've already learned Latin, when should you start learning ancient Greek? If you already know Italian, when should you learn Latin? Or if you know Spanish, is it time to learn French? Or Portuguese? Hey, I know German. I've been studying it a bit. Should I learn Dutch or Swedish or you name it? Or I've been studying Chinese and now I'm ready for Japanese or Korean. And I've been experiencing this recently, or at least thinking about this question, because I am finally ready, I think, to learn modern Greek.
Wow.
Because my ancient Greek has reached a level where I'm comfortable.
I was about to say, because yes, I think there are multiple ways to approach this. It very much depends on the student. So your next language, have you been studying language number 2 and you're wanting to move to language number 3? Or have you been studying language number 4 and you're considering working towards language number 5? These are different because these are different stages of multilingualism, if such a word even exists. If not, I just made it. But in general, I would say you have to have a good, at least a B2 in a language before, or a very high B1 before you even think about studying another language. Now, it is possible to study 2 languages simultaneously, and generally speaking, the least related they are, the better, but I'm sure he'll cover that. But I would agree, if you're still a beginner or even a lower intermediate, I wouldn't F with it.
That's why I really thought about it, because there's a lot of interference there potentially.
Yes.
So how can we answer this question? I will try to glibly say that, well, there's 2 ways I could answer it. The first way is that you should probably study as many languages as you want when you want to. Follow your heart, because if you're doing that, you will enjoy what you're doing. And you may run into frustrations. You may change your mind. You may change your plans. It's not going to be a waste. It's going to be incredibly interesting, informative, a fascinating experience culturally, linguistically.
I agree with him up to a certain extent. Of course, he's a very nice person. I think he's one of the kindest people on the internet these days. It's like a rarity. He's a gem. I'll say, though, there are some repercussions to doing that. So, of course, everyone should do anything they want, and never going to point the finger at someone and saying, you're wrong, you shouldn't do that, because we all have different journeys. However, one of the frustrations that he's mentioning there is the fact that if you study too many languages at the same time, and I've seen people trying to flex, oh, I'm studying 4 languages at the same time. Right, but you're going to stay beginner in all of them. So if you're okay with that, you just want to know bits and bats on several languages because of your interest, not because you're trying to flex or whatever, being the new polyglot, then yeah, the world is your oyster. Among these goals, you have fluency, then forget about it, because you will never be fluent. In fact, you'll never even be moderately proficient if you try to study 4 languages at the same time. Let's go.
You're going to love it. And then you might hate it, partly. But, it's not going to be a waste. It's going to be very interesting if you're trying to do too many languages at once. That said, what should you do? When should you really say, okay, I'm going to commit to the other one? Right. I think that is the intermediate level, specifically a B1, achieving
high B1. I think high B1 or B2. So I'm kind of thinking you should be higher than when he thinks. So we're both in the B. It's just, for me, it would be better if you're B2. For him, B1 is probably sufficient. So maybe somewhere in between. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.
B1. Well, what's that? What's B1? Well, if you might have heard of the Common European Framework of References for Languages, and there's the system. It is used especially within Europe, but it's also very useful outside of Europe as well to gauge the learning of languages, modern and ancient, really too. And it's something I'm working on with Latin and ancient Greek, which is fun. But the point is that if we want a really balanced acquisition of a language, there's a lot of skill sets that we want to acquire. The traditional four are listening,
Yes.
speaking, reading, and writing. And in fact, if as of 2020, they use a different system, which is actually, I think, an improvement. You have reception, production, interaction, and mediation. Mediation, one way to think about mediation is you can take charge of the experience. You can deal with the information that's happening in the classroom, or if you're dealing with native speakers or fluent speakers, whatever it is, and recognize that you don't understand something, and then say, well, wait, what was that? When you said that thing, like be able to really zero in on it, help guide the interaction in that way.
Pretty
and
high
also
level.
guide your own learning outside of that. So really become your own teacher, because that's a big path to success. And in any case, so what is B1? So it's the beginning of intermediate. So A1 is not where you start. You start at 0.
Yes.
And then after, the way you could think of it, and it depends on the course and the class and the teacher and everything, but typically the first semester of a university course is A1. So when you take that final exam for that first semester of a language, you should have achieved...
For those universities that do have a semester exam, in Italy we don't. You have to finish the full year, sort of. It's not exactly 12 months because you have 2 months that are kind of for tests, but it's not really a semester. It's longer than that. But yeah, sort of.
A1 abilities. Several abilities that are covered in here. I happen to have production open, oral production. And so pre-A1, you can produce short phrases about yourself, giving basic personal information, your name, your address, your family, nationality. That's pre-A1. So that's like in the middle of the semester, right?
Yes.
A1, you can produce simple, mainly isolated phrases about people and places. But then, what is A2? You can give a simple description or presentation of people, living or working conditions, daily routines, likes, dislikes, etc., as a short series of simple phrases and sentences linked into a list, for example.
Yeah.
That's A2. And over on Fluency Plus, I'm running this fun experiment where I am trying to speak a little bit of modern Greek every day. And what I'm doing for that is I'm thinking like, okay, what do I want to talk about? And then I'm finding out the vocabulary that I need to talk about this or that. And then I practice saying it. I don't memorize it. I'm trying to say it in different ways, look up the key vocabulary. And
technically, that is a way of memorization.
I practice it a few times so that when I stand in front of the camera, I'm able to talk about what I did today or what I eat or this or that.
Yes.
My daily routine, my likes and dislikes. I do all those different things and be able to do it in a way that if prompted, this is production. It's not interaction. It's production.
Of course.
Can I talk about those things? Because once you can do that, you should be able to retain most of that for the long term, one would hope for. I don't know, for weeks, months, especially if you're continuing to get input of the language, stimulation in that language, it will reinforce. You'll reinforce the new vocabulary and the constructions. So when I've been doing those videos, I could probably maybe sort of pass in these isolated little videos for A2, but that's not really what it is. I'm sure it's more like A1 and even pre-A1 in some respects, but I'm able to target and focus in on these specific things, which will really help. They'll set the seeds of...
I kind of do that too. I've been doing it for years. I love just saying my routine, but of course, eventually you kind of run out of things to say. Once you know how to name all of the rooms in the house and all of the objects, which is already a decent amount of vocabulary if you think about it. And then that sort of thing, and the animals and the food and the fruit, and then what day is it and the weather. Once you run out of those things, that's when you need to start like stepping it up, start going into the abstract and your hobbies, because with hobbies, goodness gracious. So yeah, no, that's all building towards the B1, I would say.
That will bloom into hopefully a very fluent modern Greek.
He will.
Representation of the language in my head in the future. So what is B1 for overall oral production? Can reasonably fluently sustain a straightforward description of a variety of subjects within your field of interest, presenting it as a linear sequence of points. So reasonably fluently about one area. So you focus in on one area and you get good at that. You know, I'm really interested in, I don't know, is dinosaurs too random? Languages, obviously, but that's maybe grammar, phonology. Maybe we get really, zero in on that one thing.
Yeah, but phonology, in my opinion, would be a bit of a B2 type. If you start talking about phonemes and diphthongs and semantics, that's already into the B2 realm. But he is correct, of course. I'm not correcting him. I'm just having a discussion, really. We should do this live. I'm going to ask him one of these days.
And that would really pull me into that intermediate stage. I'd have to be able to do at least one of a variety of things. Maybe more, but at least one. That seems to be like you've been through the first half of intermediate and you've achieved B1. And that's one way to think of it. Now, another way to think of it, if you're dealing with interaction, right? So interaction, overall interaction, you can exploit a wide range of simple language to deal with most situations likely to arise while traveling, for example.
It's probably
prepared into conversation.
I would say my Mandarin is somewhere here, probably. Still needs a lot of work. But I do have a feeling that finally, after many years of staying stuck in A2, I'm mostly stuck because, I got busy and I didn't do it, to be fair. But I did remain stuck in what I had achieved with university and hanging out with Chinese friends. And then I believe finally, since lately I've been doing Mandarin every single day, I would say I would put myself somewhere in the low B1. That's where I would put myself right now when it comes to Mandarin.
Familiar topics and express personal opinions and exchange information on topics that are familiar, of personal interest or pertinent to everyday life, your family, your hobbies, your work, travel, or current events. That's the B1. How does that compare with the A2, which is below it? Can communicate in simple and routine tasks requiring a simple and direct exchange of information on familiar and routine matters to do with work and free time. Can handle very short social exchanges, but you are rarely able to understand enough to keep conversation going of your own accord. So that's that. There's a spontaneity, there's a fluency. B1, once you achieve B1, you really get to the sweet spot where you can, I think one way you can imagine it is if you could just be with people or one person, an interlocutor who's at least at your level.
Yes.
And you can maintain conversation, talking about whatever, assuming you're on, you like talking to the person. That's important. You would want to, this has to be voluntary on the part of both interlocutors or the multiple interlocutors. And you're able to continue to have that conversation and you enjoy it. And you can do it.
And you could be missing words, by the way. If you B1 doesn't mean you understand everything, particularly if he's native and he starts using it, it's okay to miss words, just as long as you don't get completely stuck, I would say. Although then again, that can still happen sometimes. But yeah.
Remember back in, where was it? In Tucson, there was an Italian speaking club there, and that was nice. And whenever anybody was at that B1 level or higher, or it was very comfortable and pleasant and fun, and we could all maintain that. And I think none of us were, maybe we had an Italian come once in a while. That was fun. And I've had that experience in Latin and ancient Greek and in Japanese and different languages, right? So it's possible to, certainly, I think that's where the possibility arises that then you're finally ready. So I'm trying to give you a way to judge it. If you're more at here's another A2 versus B1. So here's the B2 for understanding an interlocutor.
B2.
You can clearly, this is B1.
You B1.
Can follow clearly articulated speech directed at you in everyday conversation, though you'll sometimes have to ask for repetition of particular words or signs and phrases, as opposed to the A2.
I didn't read this specific thing, but I am a former examiner, so that's why when I said B1, I immediately said, but sometimes it's fine if you don't understand, because it's just direct experience of exams.
You can understand enough to manage simple routine exchanges without undue effort. You can generally understand clear, standard speech on familiar matters, provided that you can ask for repetition or reformulation from time to time.
Yes.
And you can understand what is said clearly, slowly, and directly to you in simple, everyday conversation, and you can be made to understand if the interlocutor can take the trouble. So, trouble. So there's the big difference there is there's a relaxed nature to when you get to intermediate. It's by no means professional or incredibly precise or mastery of everything, but it's what most people think of as being fluent.
I would disagree with that. To me, a fluent is B2. That's what I consider fluency. But then again, I see where he's coming from. It kind of depends also because while we do apply these for all languages, it is clear that a B1 in Latin or Mandarin is a lot more, or Japanese, is a lot more impressive than a B1 in Italian or English. And that is simply because there is subjective difficulty, there is objective difficulty, there is limited resources, in particularly with the dead languages, although I don't like that term as it's misunderstood, but you know what I mean. And so B1, like your pronunciation could still be kind of bad, and you could still pass a B1. So either we're talking about a really high B1, like this guy is almost getting into B2 territory, still B1 when it comes to grammar and whatnot, but at least there is a certain level of fluency. But in my experience, the students that take B1 tests and pass them are not fluent. And by fluent, I mean there is a lot of watashi wa to be fluent, you need to be able to, it needs to flow. And usually this flow happens at the B2 territory. I'm not saying necessarily a high B2, but a B2 territory, in my experience. And a certain fluidity with the language, a certain natural aspect of the language that whenever you convey information. Because the freaking polyglots, they will try anything they can to lower their bar of what fluency is, so that they can claim fluency in so many languages for the frauds.
And which is just, it's like a word, well, fluent. Like, I'm fluent in ancient Greek, yes, but what does that mean in much more specific terms? It means I can have a conversation with people at least at my level in ancient Greek, certainly less or more, but you know, same at least. So let's just assume interlocutors of the same level, and talk about pretty much anything. Certainly when it's everyday stuff, or maybe could be.
And that's an outstanding. Like the fact that he reached that is insane. Like this guy, and he can do that in Latin too. Goodness gracious!
Directed towards a piece of literature that we could be reading or talking about together, or some other topic. You can do that, and it doesn't mean you don't need to look up a word. It doesn't mean you know how to say everything that's necessarily within that. But you can just, the fluidity of conversation and your flexibility within it means that if you're not quite sure how to say this exact word that you need, you can use another synonym.
I can see where he's coming from.
That gets the point across enough that the conversation continues.
Sure.
What's so interesting, of course, about conversation in its ephemeral nature is most of it's not super important or critical or essential. It's not a prepared speech. It's not a book or a text or a poem. It's just, you know, it's the exchanging of information. And a lot of it doesn't have to be super precise. And I find that really, really kind of neat, the ephemeral nature, especially when it comes to ancient languages. When ancient languages can become so ephemeral that we can just vibrate the air with our voices. And we have these memories and these personal experiences, and they affect us in our, you know, in our internal neural networks, right? You know, in our brains, we're able to, you know, of course, improve our use of the language through having those wonderful interactions, but they're not so important that we had to record them. I find that lovely.
And also, even when it comes to Latin and ancient Greek, it kind of brings the language to a more real feel, because if you think about it, generally speaking, all we do is listen and read important poems and speeches from generals and politicians and philosophers. But it is that kind of makes the language feel crystallized. I would love it to be able to go back in time and listen to two ancient Romans speaking about everyday stuff. Wouldn't that be amazing? It would make the language feel more real to us.
I find that really, really cool. And of course, modern living languages that are not endangered are in a similar. You don't have to worry about that.
Of course.
So what is my recommendation very specifically? So say you're studying Latin, and I know a lot of you are. It's just fantastic. Until you get to a B1 level competency, you may want to hold off before going to a Romance language.
I agree.
And assuming you're a native English speaker, for example, or maybe even a native speaker of German, a non-Romance speaker. Let's say that, just because that's easier for me to imagine. And a lot of Anglophones out there. You're obviously a speaker of English, and you may be a native speaker of English, so this may be directly useful for you. So you have been learning Latin. When should you then say, okay, I think I want to learn Italian? Now, if your heart's there, you should just do it. Or if you know, or if it's Spanish or Portuguese or French or Romanian, all these are incredible and beautiful languages. Catalan, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to leave these other Romance languages out there. A lot out there. If you want to do it, follow your passion. But I think you will find, if you haven't achieved B1 in most of the domains, or most of the competencies rather, which the old competencies again are reading, writing,
Yes.
listening, and speaking, and the new competencies, which have been those four have been put into the new ones that the CEFR talks about, which are reception, production, interaction, and mediation. So if you don't have at least a B1 level competency in that, you're going to notice interference. And
Yes.
that's where your still nascent experience with whatever language you're studying will start to become a little confusing. And I noticed this too in different times. In fact, I think this might be universal. I imagined whenever I started learning another language that it felt like there was a part of my brain or my psyche or something where the foreign languages were somehow stored or interacting in a way. And I have no neurological basis for this rationalization of how it felt, but it felt like that. And by the way, I'd be loved. One of the reasons I want to make this video is I want to hear what you have to say in the comments. So at any time, please leave a comment about your experience about this. If you have felt this, like if you've learned more.
Yeah, I've had a situation where now that I'm focusing on Mandarin, occasionally Japanese slips through. Not too much though, and that's probably because they are unrelated, which is kind of connecting back to what I was saying at the beginning. It's worse if you are sort of in the A2 territory with Italian and then you start taking Portuguese, you're going to mix them. You're going to mix those two. Or Italian and Spanish, even worse. At that point, it's easier if you are studying Italian and then you just start taking German. At least they shouldn't interfere too much, but it will still happen.
The one language, is there a place where the multiple languages reside in your psyche and your memory and your mind? That's how it felt for me, and I think that's still the case. But I remember when I hadn't learned to that, what I now realize is a B1 level in one language or another, there was definitely interference.
Yeah.
I could definitely feel that with, say, French and Spanish, because I learned Italian of the Romance languages first, and before I even learned Latin. So that made it, because when I learned, I learned Italian, right? So I learned Italian, I got fluent. I probably was at B2, I would assume.
Yeah, his Italian is really good, by the way. We often switch, and we can effortlessly switch between English and Italian anytime.
Before I started learning Latin. So it was very easy for me to go into Latin. And in fact, it was helped from that experience in the sense that the languages are related and they can help one another. Comparable now for me is the fact that I'm learning modern Greek with a strong foundation in ancient Greek. In fact, I wonder, could it be said, yeah, I'd say in some ways, since I've read way more literature in ancient Greek than I have in Italian, it's a different kind of input, but I probably in some ways have a higher level of ancient Greek now, learning modern Greek, than I had in Italian before I started learning Latin. I would have to guess. I haven't really systematically looked and tried to challenge myself. Like, do I really have B1 or B2 in ancient Greek? And I'm sure I know I have lots of deficiencies. I'm working on them. But let's just say I'm at B2 in ancient Greek right now. And because of that, I find learning, I think I've got to comfortably into a lot of areas to B1 or better last year, about a year ago. And that's when I realized, I think I'm ready to start learning modern Greek, and I did.
Yes.
And since my work is...
Okay, so that's good. 15 minutes exactly. I'm going to leave the rest to you if you want to go and check it. But I would say we agree. Probably it's somewhere in between that B1, B2, that it's the sweet spot for when you can actually begin to learn another language without having to worry about too much interference. But at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you're thinking to learn multiple languages simultaneously. And thank you for joining Metatron's Academy.